G'day, this is Andrew Price here, and I'm sitting here in my office, which is where I get all my work done here in South Korea. And thankfully, in this tutorial, we're not going to be making the scene that you can see right behind me, because it is a tragedy. That green couch does not mesh with anything. In this tutorial, what we're going to be making is this scene right here, an easy lounge room, because as it turns out, most 3D artists like to make lounge rooms. I did a big survey on it, and that was like #1 by far. And if you check out any forum, it's just flooded with lounge room photos. And when you think about it, it makes sense, because every other room in a house has a purpose. You know, the bathroom is for privacy. The bedroom is for sleeping and sexy times. The kitchen is for cooking. The laundry is for doing your laundry. But a lounge room, that's where the fun happens. That's the relaxing zone. It's the entertainment area. It's where you show off your trophies to your guests, and you put up all your artwork to show how sophisticated you are. And it's the most expressive room of the house, really. And so for that reason, for very good reason, a lot of artists like to make it using 3D software. So I thought it would be a fun idea to give you guys sort of a taster of the Architecture Academy, and by showing you how to create a very simple, easy lounge room. Now I wanted to do like a full-scale, massive lounge room with, you know, a couch and books and all that kind of stuff, but evidently that actually takes a very, very long time to do. I didn't want to make a tutorial that was like 2 or 3 hours long, so I'm keeping it short. And actually, though, if you stay to the end of this tutorial, I'm going to give you a sneak peek at the lounge room tutorial that's inside the Architecture Academy. So I'll show you what that looks like. So stay to the end of the video to see that. But without further ado, I think we should get cracking on this guy right here. So go ahead now, open up Blender, and we'll get started. Hey, what do you know? It's already finished. No, so this is the finished result that we're going to be making. As you can see, it is a fairly simple scene. It's just a cube, essentially. A bunch of chairs, a bunch of little decorations and stuff like that, with some trees outside to give a very nice result when rendered. This is the finished result that you can see right here. So we are going to be using models from the starter pack, which is a free pack that I've put out. So if you're watching this YouTube, wherever, you can see a link below this video where you can download the starter pack, because you'll need it to do this tutorial, because we're just going to be shamelessly pulling in those models. Nothing wrong with using models, by the way. I mean, when you consider the fact that it takes like hours to model any good, you know, furniture, you know, a scene like this could take forever. So anyways, so this is basically it. And then as well as that, we've also got a little bit of compositing as well to give it a, you know, the finishing touches, and hopefully having a bit of fun and learning something new along the way. So I think without further ado, let's go ahead and crack open a new scene in Blender. Now let me just start up the keys tool. There we go. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to delete this lamp here. And using this cube is going to be the lounge room. So first thing I want to do is I want to move it up, holding down Control, just so that it's resting on that, that grid floor there. All right, and now what I want to do is I actually want to make this measured to scale. Now this is something that a lot of Blender users are amazed when they finally learn it. I know I was, I'll be honest, I was one of those people. You can actually set Blender to use real world scale. If you go to the scene panel right here, you have got an option for units, okay? So of course you're going to use metric, as you should. And once you click on that, what will happen is if you bring up this sidebar, you'll notice that the dimensions are now in meters. And if you, when it was set to none before, you can see it was these arbitrary numbers here. But now set it to metric, and now you've actually got real measurements. And that reflects with everything inside Blender now. So like the shadow of the sun size, that's measured in like centimeters, and you know, all that extra good stuff. Anyway, So what I want to do now is I want to scale this cube so that it matches the real world height of a ceiling. Now the real world height of an interior ceiling is about 2.74 meters high. I don't know what that is in imperial. What is that? Is that 9 feet? Is that what that is? I don't know. Anyway, there's sort of like a bit of a discussion between architects, like throughout the ages. The ceilings I think started out really high, and then they got progressively like lower, and then now it's like fashionable to have high ceilings again, even though it costs heaps to heat up the room. But anyway, some people like them high, small, whatever. But 2.74 is around about the right amount. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull out this wall here, just drag this out to make it sort of a rectangular prism, and then I'm going to delete this face right here. All right, now to position the camera. So this corner right here, this is where I'm going to have all my furniture and everything. So I'm going to snap the camera to my position right now by hitting Control-Alt-Number-Pad 0. Just going to roughly get it in the right spot. And the other thing I want to do is I want to actually set the aspect ratio of the camera to something different. I normally never do this for a tutorial, but for photography, as a rule, you should be using an aspect ratio which matches whatever the scene has. And in this case, it's more vertical than it is horizontal. So I'm going to go with 1024 by 1400. Don't ask me where I came up with that. That's just the measurement that I went with, and that's the one that works. And so I'm just going to bring in the camera to be roughly here, okay, just so we're sort of like working with it. And another thing, whilst we're here, I want to make sure that the camera is 90 degrees, okay, along the X rotation. That's so that it lines up with a wall. That is a solid rule, and the same for Y. I'm going to make that 0. And that's just a rule amongst architecture photographers. They say you should never ever tilt your camera up or down for an interior scene or exterior scene because it makes it look like the walls are falling over. So that's a little tip for you. Anyways, oh yeah, someone's saying something to me. Maybe I should be busy. You set me to busy. There we go. Okay, cool. So next step. We're actually going to go ahead and start bringing in some furniture. Now, at this step, when you're creating a lounge room, you want to be thinking about the person, you know, like the person that is going to live in this area. If you didn't watch the introduction to the architecture, the complete introduction to architectural rendering video I did before, essentially, the best way to plan interior and architecture and pretty much anything to do with a house is to come up with a specific individual in your head and then design the building according to that. So in our case, the individual that we're designing for is a let's say 40-year-old guy, and he's a bachelor, lives by himself, and he enjoys reading. He's quite rich, quite wealthy, so he's got a nice little house with a view, and he likes reading. So he's got books and stuff, and he has a little reading corner. So that's the sort of story that we're going for. It's a very simple story, but you got to have something. So now is the time we're going to start pulling in those models from the starter pack. So I'm going to go File, Append, and you see from the starter pack here, I'm going to click on Models, and the first thing I'm going to append in is the Barcelona chair and stool, which if you go into thumbnail view, you can see it looks like that. And I'm going to use Group because that's the most easiest to work with. And I'm just going to click the name of the group and then click Link, Append. And there you go. Bada boom, bada bing. We've got the chairs in the scene. So now I'm just going to push this towards the corner. Now, why would you have a chair against a corner, you may ask? Well, they found that actually human beings are most comfortable when their back is against a wall. And this is a clever little game you can play with yourself. Next time you go to a restaurant with your friends, and you know, you walk into the restaurant and you find a table, and usually the first person to find the table and to sit down and choose their seat will always choose with the seat with its back against the wall. It's like a subconscious thing that humans do, and it's crazy. Once you notice it, you can never unnotice it, I'm telling you. It's just like, even like the most nicest of friends you could possibly have that are like saints, they will still do it. It's just because we feel comfortable with our back against a wall. If it's out in the open, you feel all vulnerable. Anyway, well, let's get on with it. We got the chair and the stool. Now we're going to bring in the coffee table. So go back to our models here, and we're going to bring in this Japanese styled coffee table, which I think looks quite nice. Let's bring this in. And there we go. So I'm just going to drag this across so that it's almost touching the wall. There we go. And then go into top view. And there you go. Okay. Now I think it's a little bit too high, so I'm just going to scale that down just a little bit. Like so. Yeah, that's pretty good. Okay. And now the next thing I'm going to bring in is that light. Okay, so we're going to bring in all the models now, basically. Just get the whole scene in place. So this is the light suspended, okay? It's the floor lamp called the Arco floor lamp. It's an actual real floor lamp, okay? So you just grab this base, because it's all parented to the base. And I'm just going to move it just beside this coffee table right here. And then I'm going to scale it up. It should actually already be to scale it. For some reason it's not. Anyway. Okay, so just to about there. And by the way, whilst we're at it, let's grab our camera and let's turn on a thirds composition guide. And that way it'll help us place our furniture so that it's in an appealing way. So somewhere about that should be good. And then the next thing I'm going to append in is the artwork. So the canvas dry paint smudge, bring that guy in. Alright, and this is something cool. If you change the snapping, instead of snapping it to increments, the default value, if you snap it to face, then when you're moving it, hold down control, bam, look at that. It snaps to its face. That's really cool. It's something that a very passionate fan told me about. He sent me an email saying, man, love the tutorials. I love watching them. Me and my sister, we watch them together. It's great. But there's something I have to tell you. It's pissing me off. Why do you never ever use any of these snap functions? And I was like, yeah, I've heard of snap. I've never used it. And I gave it a go. And man, I'm hooked. I can't go back now. So it's really handy. Anyways. All right. So that's in place where that is right there. Now, I think we should get into the lighting, because before you get into the materials, you got to be able to light it, you know? As the Bible says, in the beginning there was light. And so, well, actually, we did the modeling first, didn't we? So we kind of went backwards. But anyways, we're going to throw in some light. So the main light source is actually just going to be an environment light, okay? Because, you know, there's the sun, but there's also the environment. So even on a bright, clear, sunny day, and you've got the harsh white sun beating down, the sky is blue, or it's gray, or it's, you know, whatever else, and that is coloring the shadows. So actually, your environment lighting is one of the most powerful things you can use in order to get realistic lighting in your scene. So that's why one of the bonuses included in the starter pack is an HDR file. So to add in that HDR file, go to the world settings right here, then click on use nodes, and then on this little color, click that little dot next to the color, and then change it to environment texture. Bam. Then click on open, then click on HDR, and I'm going to load in, you can see I've got an HDR and I've got a JPEG, and notice the file size difference, all right? Now I'm going to start with the JPEG, and I'll show you why sometimes the JPEG, even though it's you know, it's less likely to crash, because sometimes big HDRs will crash your scene. It can sometimes have its limitations. So I'm going to load that in first, all right? And well, let's go ahead and hit render. Oh, go into rendered view mode, all right? So let's do that right now. Let's just view it from this position. Okay, so a very gray, bland looking scene. But if we actually zoom out, we have a look at everything, we've loaded in this massive looking HDR. And that's very cool, isn't it? Yes. So we've got very nice looking lighting that's coming in through this big open window here. Now I want to actually create a window myself next to this little chair here, because I sort of imagine, you know, this guy's sitting in a chair, he wants to look out of a window. And also, from my own sort of personal experience, I found that if an interior scene doesn't have a window and you can't actually see out of any window, the room feels very closed off and very, what's the word, like cramped. What's the name of that person? Claustrophobia, that's it. Not a person, a phobia. It sort of makes it feel a little bit claustrophobic, you know, it just feels uncomfortable. So I find that for interior scenes, always put a window in view of the camera. Now, before I start doing any cuts, what I'm going to do is I'm going to separate the ceiling, okay? And I'm going to separate the floor as well, and I'm going to make them their own separate objects. And that is so that we can now go ahead and do a cut by hitting Control R. And I'm just going to line that up with that little vertical line there, that little thirds line. And then I'll do another cut horizontally, just at about the sort of level that the guy reading his book or whatever would sort of feel comfortable with, something about there. You know, in an ideal world, everybody would have their own, you know, their house customized exactly to the way they want it. But, you know, only the rich can afford that. So everybody else just sort of has to deal with the scenario. But in this case, we are living in the rich world. We're planning our house to exactly the way we want it, which is cool. All right, so this is where my window is going to be. And I'm going to delete that face now. And now, when we have a look at the render, we should now be able to see some light coming in through that window. There we go. So that's cool, right? It's not bad, but there's not enough light. Okay, so let's turn up the light. Let's crank it up. Let's go 5. And look at that. We've got a problem. Okay, you can see that the sky has now become completely white. Blacked out white. You can't see any detail in it. It is just solid white because it's too bright. Okay? This is when using an HDR file will come in handy. Now, the difference between an HDR file and a JPEG file is that an HDR file has different exposure levels saved into it, meaning that you can go extra bright and extra dark and you won't lose detail like you would with a standard JPEG. As a classic example, let me load this in and I'll show you how it looks with the HDR file. And there you go, look at that. You can see the clouds, you can see everything. So this is what it is on number 1. And you can go up. So actually, let's just pull out and I'll show you how it looks, right? Out in the big open field here. So let's just crank this up. And you can see that even as we go really super bright, you can still see those clouds there. And they're not disappearing until you get to like extreme levels. So that's because each of the HDR files that are included in the Architecture Academy, they have a high, it's called EVs. So each HDR has a certain number of EVs. So each of these has an EV level of at least 12. You can also turn it down the other direction. And that's kind of cool. If you wanted to go for like a nighttime scene, you can turn this way down and it looks like a nighttime scene, which is kind of cool. Anyways, the level that we're going to use with our HDR is 10. Okay. So let's go view through the camera. And actually, maybe 10 is a bit much. Look at that. It's kind of overblown it. Oh, I don't know. 10 is what we need. Before, oh, that's right. Okay, so that's the other thing I was going to tell you about. That's right. You can actually rotate an HDR. If you're not happy with how, you know, the exact portion of the sky that you're able to view there, you can rotate an HDR. So if you go to the node editor and then click on world, what you'll get is our little environment HDR that we've just added in over here. But what you can do is if you add in a texture coordinate node and then a vector mapping node and just drag this in, connect it from generated, make sure it's generated, connect that to the mapping node and then the mapping node to the vector input of the environment texture. Then what you can actually do is spin the HDR around. Let me just pull that out again so you can actually see everything. You can spin it around. So that is very, very useful because some cases you want the light to be streaming in from a different angle. So if I view it from this angle, you can see that's where the light is right now. So what I want to do is from this angle here, I want to have the sun sort of over to the right-hand side, casting light inside this room over here. So I would have the sun, let's see, about over there, I think is pretty good. Let me just think. The sun would be, hang on, a bit more, I don't know. Geez, it's almost exactly the same position it was before. I didn't change much at all. Maybe a bit twisted, a little bit more around. Anyways, and then I'm going to set the HDR for that to be 10. So you get a little bit of the actual background there coming through. I think I'm blabbering. Let's just go on with the rest of the tutorial. I think we talked about HDRs for far too long. Okay, next big thing we're going to be doing is adding in the floor texture, the floor material, getting in that nice glossy looking wooden floor material. So as part of the starter pack, I included in a whole bunch of textures, so that's what we're going to be using. So add in a new texture, make sure it's a new one, and call it wooden floor. And then down here in the node editor, switch back to the material nodes. And the first texture that I'm going to load in, image texture, connect that to the diffuse. The first one I'm going to load in is this one, the color texture. You got a whole bunch of variations here. The normal map, the spec map, we're going to get to them in a second, but the first one is the color texture. So we load that in, and actually let's just move these models to its own separate render layer. Well, not render layer, separate layer, I guess. Let's just, come on. Move it to layer 2. Okay, there we go. All right, now let's just focus on this. Okay, render, 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 render. There we go. Okay, now look at that. Doesn't that look amazing? No, it doesn't. We haven't UV unwrapped it yet. So first thing, let's just apply the scale for that floor. And then next, just go into edit mode, hit U, and then select unwrap. And it has now done it for you. You don't need to go to the node editor or the UV image editor. You can see it's UV unwrapped perfectly fine. So the next thing I want to do, because it's far too big, the scale of this wooden floor here is like if you were a mouse, then that would be the scale. So what we need to do is add in a texture coordinate node, then a mapping node, connect it from the UV to the mapping input, and then the mapping output to the image vector input. And then I'm going to set this scale to be 4. So it's now 4 times the scale that it was before. And that's fine to do because this is a seamless texture, meaning you can't tell if it has been tiled. I guess if you zoomed in close enough, you could sort of notice some repeating patterns, but it is seamless, so it looks fine. Next thing we would do is we want the floor to be reflective. We want it to actually reflect something. So what you would normally do is you would add in a mix shader node like this, and then you would combine it with a glossy shader node like this. And you would just connect the two, and looking at it from here, it's starting to look very, very unimpressive at all. Now, I'm going to set the roughness, meaning the the blurriness of the reflection. I'm going to turn that down to 0.02, which is a very sharp-ish looking reflection. Now, the scene is very, very overly bright at the moment, so it's hard to see exactly what's going on. So if I just turn this gloss down, you can sort of see it a little bit better. Anyways, that brings me to the next point. I'm going to duplicate this image texture, delete the texture, and then I'm going to load in another one. And this one that I'm going to load in is called the spec map. So it's a black and white texture. Load that in, connect it to the same output of that mapping coordinate, so that it's using the same one. And then, very important, you want to set the color space for a spec map to non-color data. I only learned this just the other day, which is really annoying when you learn important things like that way, way, way late. But anyways, you have to set it to non-color data. And then what you would do is connect this to the factor input like this. And now what that is doing, if you can see it, it's very hard to see because it's so bright. I'm going to turn this down because it's just getting ridiculous. There we go. You can kind of tell. I don't know. Everything looks the same because the scene is not enough going on. If I was to add in a UV sphere, let's say for example, and just as an example, let's say this UV sphere was emitting a light. Okay, I got to do this because I can't actually see what's going on here. It's just getting crazy. Let's just set this, crank it up. There we go. All right, now we can actually start to see the reflection. Okay, so as you can see, the dark part of the texture is not actually casting any glossiness, which is good. So one thing you will want to do though is add in a color ramp node, and you can set in how bright and how dark you want various parts of that spec to be. So I don't want any part of the wood to be solid black, meaning no reflection. So I want to turn up this black value to be something around about 0.2. So that at least everything has a 0.2 value. And then for the brightness, I want to turn that down to be something about a 0.7, let's say. And we can adjust these later as we go, but for now that's going to do fine. Next thing I'm going to add in is a bump map. Now, most people when they do bump maps, they use a black and white bump map to get the bumps from. However, it's actually better to use what is called a normal map. So a normal map is, if we add in image texture, click on open, go to our starter pack texture, It's this one, this big old ugly purplish looking one. Click on that. All right. Now this purple weird looking normal map will actually give superior results to a normal black and white bump map because it gives bumping in another direction other than just straight up and down. Now I don't know the ins and outs of that. I'm not a tech guy. I don't know how it all works, but I do know that it is superior. Did some research on it. So there you go. Now, with a normal map, the first thing you want to do is set it to non-color data. If you don't do that, you'll mess up and it's you'll have ruined any sort of good bump map. So once you've done that, then you want to then add in a normal map node because Cycles needs to know that this is a normal map texture. So you then take this, put this through the normal map mode, which will then read all that purplish weird looking data, and then connect this to the glossy and the diffuse normal inputs, just like that. And now if we zoom in, you can see that the floor has some cool looking bumps on it. Isn't that awesome? Now, one problem. The cracks. You can hardly see the cracks, all right? It just looks like it's one slab of wood. And you know, you've got some slight cracks in there from the normal map bump mapping. But we want there to be some deeper looking cracks, so it actually looks like it's made of wood. So, luckily for us, what do we have? We have another texture. And it is called... go to thumbnail view. It's called the cracks texture. So you load this guy in, and then connect it again to the mapping so that it's using the same scale. And then with this guy, what we want to do is we actually want to connect it to the displacement input of our actual material output, okay? So you can just connect it just straight up like this, and that'll work, and you can see automatically it's given us a very nice looking result. However, it's too much. It's far too deep. If you zoom in really close, you can see that it's out of control deep. So what we want to do is just tone that down a bit. So I'm going to add in a math node, connect this up, and then change the math to be multiply. I don't get any of this, by the way. I don't know math, multiply, whatever. And then I'm just going to turn that down to be something less offensive, because 1 was too offensive. So this value, yeah, it looks pretty good. And what I also want to do is I want to actually make these cracks colored. You know, like in the real world, a crack is dark inside, sort of fake that shading effect. So to do that, what I would do is I would add in a mix RGB node, connect this up like that, then take the output from our image texture of the cracks map, put that in there into the bottom input, then set the blend type to be multiply. Now, you might not have actually noticed anything changing, and that's because currently our image texture is set to non-color data. So let's set it to color instead. And now you should actually be able to see that the crack is colored, a little bit darker than it was before. And you can of course turn that up to be as dark as you want, but I'm fine with whatever, doesn't really matter. So let's look at it from the camera view now. You can see we've got some nicer looking wooden floors. So when we add in the rest of the scene, it's going to start to look cool. At the moment though, once I delete this UV sphere, this looks pretty bland and boring. But anyways, that's just how it is. I'm going to crank the lighting back up to 10 because we need that for the rest of the scene. And I'm going to bring back the furniture. And oh yeah, while we're at it, we might as well save it because you know how it is. You don't want to get into too much trouble. So let's just save this as just in case it crashes on us. Okay, cool. All right, now the next thing I want to do is I want to add in a window, okay? Because most houses, this is a fun fact, most houses are not actually open to the outside world. Because what would happen is if it rains, guess what? It's going inside. So you got to have a window, right? Now, if you were to model a window yourself, you can do it. It's doable. It's not a hard task. It's just a boring task. So there is an add-on, okay? And I recommend everybody get it. It's called the Window Generator 2, okay? I'm going to put a link underneath this video where you can get that, right? And once you've done it, just install it as per usual, and then you put it in your Blender add-ons folder, and then click on add-ons, window generator, and then check that little box next to it. And once you've done that, you need to put your cursor wherever you want a window to appear, like at the base of the window. So I've just snapped it to that point right there. So now if I go to, let's just make this full screen so you guys can see what's actually going on. I'm going to go add, then go mesh, and then at the bottom here, look, you've got window. Boom. There we go. We've got a nice big old window there. Now there's a problem with this with this script in that you can't actually rotate this window, which is kind of annoying, if I do say so myself. It's one of its downfalls. Anyway, if you push T, bring up the toolbar, you get all these options where you can change the window. So you can make it, you know, horizontally wide, vertically high, as many as you want. I think I just turn off sill because it's just too confusing, and it's just, or there's enough buttons as there is. So anyway, in our case, what I want to do is I actually want to go for 3, like horizontally 3 wide, and I want to go, let's go 100. So these sizes here are the width of each of these horizontal windows here. Okay, so I'm going to go 100 for those two there, and then for the middle one, I'm just going to go 60. Okay, I think that should be pretty big. And then this value here is the height of the window, so I'm going to turn that down. And actually, what I want to do as well, because I'm a cool cat, is I'm going to give it a vertical window as well, another one. And let's turn the size of that down to, can't be too small, it has to look realistic, doesn't it? So turn that up. Also, I'll turn down the rises. Rises is the width of those windows there. I'll turn that down to 4. Also the inner frame, that little bit of plastic in the middle there, just turn that down. I mean, I love this this add-on. It's really good, really handy. And you've also got presets here, so you can add in a whole bunch of different presets. It's very cool. You can change like flat, triangular windows. You can do all sorts of cool stuff. These checkboxes here, by the way, will give you a little, like, you know, like an openable window. You can open it with handles or whatever. You know, you get the point. Anyways, so now that we've done that, what you can do, because there's no rotate function, that's the only bad thing about this. If you just go, if you push N, oh man, let me get it right. There we go. If you push N, you can actually you can change the rotation in the transform buttons over here. However, once you start adjusting any of these features over here, it's all just going to snap back again. So just make a note of it. So let me just change these values to what I think should probably work. Let's try this again. It's a weird way of doing things, isn't it? Yeah, it is. But it's just how it is. Anyway, I think that'll do. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rotate this now by 90 degrees. And if it doesn't fit, so what? Let's just scale it down a little bit. Scale it down, and then I'll grab these in edit mode and I'll just pull them up so that they actually match the window size. And look at that, beautiful. We've now got a window, and we barely had to do anything. The other cool thing about this script, this window generator script, is that it's assigned materials. So it's given the window frame, the PVC material, the plastic, that little tiny like black piece in there, and then it's given it glass as well. The only trouble is that it doesn't work with cycles. Like, it hasn't actually configured anything for any of the cycles things. But that's pretty easy to do. So the first thing we're going to focus on is the glass material, because I think that's very important. So go ahead and with glass there selected, click on Use Nodes. And when you do that, it'll now appear in the node editor, and now you can start doing stuff. So first things first, delete the diffuse node. Next, we're going to load in the glass shader node. Now, who among you would think that a window would just have this material, and that's all you need to do? Right? Right? Raise your hands, raise your hands. Quite a few of you I see, yeah. Wrong! So wrong. Oh man, you're so wrong you don't even know it. No, actually, the reason this is wrong is that when light passes through the window, through this glass here, it's gonna try to cast shadows and refractions and all sorts of stuff through the glass into the scene. And what you'll get is a very, very highly noisy scene, like noise everywhere. And you don't want that, right? So actually what we want is we want the glass to appear as a normal reflection, you know, so like it still reflects off objects in the scene and stuff like that. However, when light passes through it, we want the light that passes through it to pass through it as if the window was invisible, right? So it sounds like it's pretty hard to do. Well, it's actually not. It's pretty easy once you know how to do it. All you need to do is add in a transparent shader. Let's just put that underneath the glass shader. Then add in a mix shader. Drop this in here. And then combine these two. And now, this is where the magic happens. We are going to add in a light path node. Drop this in here. And what I'm going to do is grab the is shadow ray, and I'm going to put that into the factor input. So what that's going to do, to the best of my knowledge, is for the shadows for this material, is it's going to use the bottom input, the transparent one, or it could be the top. I'm sort of hard to sort of guess these sort of things. And then it will use the glass for everything else. Okay, but that's not all. We want to then duplicate this mix shader. And then I want to take the is diffuse ray and then put that into the top input. So I think this is what this is doing, is it's taking, it's telling this material for its diffuse self, just use glass, right? And because that's in the top input, and then everything else should be 0. I could be very wrong in the way I'm saying this. I'm sure somebody's going to correct me. I had it all before I started the tutorial, and now it's just left my mind. I'm starting to feel very unconfident with what I'm telling you. But this is the node arrangement for glass, okay? So it's using the light path node to tell cycles which one of these shaders to use for different parts. So you can do all sorts of cool stuff like change the color of shadows and all sorts of that weird stuff. Anyways, this is what you're seeing right here. If you wanted to screenshot it, is how you make good glass planes, okay? All right, let's give this a render. I'm feeling very deflated now. I felt like I knew it all. Now I'm lost, so alone. All right, so the scene's coming together very slowly, but it is coming together. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create another window. This is going to be very quick, this one, because it's actually going to be out of frame. But I want to create a window along this open wall here, because unless this room is under construction, there should be something there. So I'm going to add in a window, and thanks to the fact that it's now at front view, the window is actually in the right place, so we don't have to rotate it or anything like that. I'm going to click that little button there. There we go. There's the windows. So I'm going to go vertically 1, and I'm just going to push this up so that it's hitting the roof, to the roof, to the roof, to the roof. Boom. There we go. All right. It's getting very nerdy up in here, isn't it? Singing some hip hop whilst doing a tutorial. It's very unacceptable of me. I apologize for that. Alright, so this is basically it. Let's go 160 maybe, 160 again. That's good enough. Good enough for me, so it should be good enough for you. I'm just going to go into edit mode, just make sure it's filled up, and that's good. Fine and dandy. Actually, no it's not, because I'll tell you why. It's in front of the camera. I didn't expect that, actually. That's kind of annoying. Yeah, alright, so the room needs to be wider. Okay. Well, that is annoying. Alright, make that wider. Bring out the rest of the room. Make that wider as well. And let's pull this back here. Now, okay, now it's working. But this wall here still needs to be done, so let's pull that out as well. Really messed that up, didn't I? I thought I had it all going on. Alright, there we go. Okay. Now, on that note, because we've now resized this this plane here and it's using UV scales, I'm going to have to reset the scale of that and then just go UV unwrap it again. And that way it'll now be the correct scaling. So, okay, cool. Now everything's looking pretty good. I'm going to give a quick material to our PVC, also known as the window frame. So I'm going to click on Use Nodes. And I'm just going to go for a black metal, slightly shiny looking finish. So I'm going to add in a mix shader node. Wow, we're getting on 40 minutes in this tutorial. I hope I'm not boring any of you. But, you know, it's architecture. It's pretty long-winded. I try and keep it interesting, but you know how it is. There's only so much interest you can get from watching somebody else use Blender. Alright, 0.1. What sort of darkness do we want to go for? Alright, so something about that I think should be good. So I'm setting the mix shade at a 0.1, so it's mostly diffused with a little bit of gloss, leaving that at 0.2. And just so we can differentiate it, I'm going to make sure that the viewport color is the same as the diffuse color. So, fine and dandy indeed. Oh, by the way, just in case you're curious why we actually bothered to add in this window here, it's because this guy, this lamp, very annoyingly, is reflective. So, you would be able to see a big gaping hole in the room through the lamp's reflection, which would kind of blow the illusion a little bit, I think. Oh, and on that note, there's a light bulb in here. Look at that, little light bulb, and it's got an emission to it, right? Now, because it's a daytime scene, you actually don't want lights turned on inside the room. That's a general rule. It looks weird to the viewer. So turn it off. So I'm just going to replace it with a diffuse shader instead. And there we go. So now it's not on. There's no actually light coming from it. So again, little rule for you. If it's a daytime scene, turn off any artificial light sources inside the room, or else you'll look weird. Okay, cool. So let's give this a quick render now. I'm going to set it to sampling, rendering at 100 samples, and let's just see how this goes now. Well, that's just perfect, isn't it? It looks so great. It doesn't, because we haven't actually got a main light source. This HDR that we're using is mostly clouds, so it's giving a very soft, diffuse light over everything. So there's nothing that is drawing your attention to anything in the scene. It's very bland, wishy-washy, aside from the fact that there's not enough samples. What we need is a sun. So we're going to use, guess what, guys? Sun lamp. Lamp, sun. All right. Now, we want the focus of the scene to be on these chairs here, right? So we have to make sure that the light from the sun here is actually casting in the right place. Now, believe it or not, this is actually very important, because if you get it wrong, then you'll get too much of the scene or too little in focus, and that's not good. Okay, so I'm just sort of lining it up with the top of this window here, because I know that's where most of the light's going to come from. Actually, we're going to add in a blind, and the blind is sort of going to go down to there. So let me just, let's pull that back again. Let me just set that to there. So I want the light to end sort of about here, like at the edge of that coffee table, but I want the light to hit the chairs, so it's in there. And then if we go from the front view, or side view, like this, I guess, yeah. What are we seeing? So the light will come in through there and through there. So it's going in for that sort of range. Okay, so that should be pretty good. All right, now for the actual material of the sun, I'm going to set the strength to be 7, which is pretty heavy. You know, it's pretty heavy. And the shadow size, I'm going to set that to 8 centimeters, which is generally far too high, like a very soft looking shadow. Generally, I only use like 1 centimeter or 5 millimeters for a really crisp shadow, but we're using 8 centimeters because the sky is mostly overcast, but we've got a little bit of sun sort of peeking through the clouds, so it's a very diffused looking sun. And for the color of the sun, I'm just going to give it a very slightly yellow color, because in an overcast sky, the sun doesn't really have much color to it, much saturation. So anyway, now that we've now done this, let's go ahead, give this another render with our shiny new sun, and let's see how that looks. Much better. Very sparkly looking room, if I do say so myself. But the sun's going in sort of the right direction, almost. It's all right, we can do a bit of adjustments later, but it's pretty good. Now, for those sparkles. The sparkles, also known as fireflies, are caused by 2 things. For the first one, the main culprit is generally caustics. Caustics is the reflection of light passing through water generally, but also metal, and it casts, you know, cool looking light shining effects. However, it always normally causes these horrible looking fireflies. So in your light path, just check the no caustics button, and then that will save you a lot of the fireflies. The other thing though is if you go to the sampling section and we set the clamp to, let's say, 5, right? Now clamp will clamp down on anything which is unruly, right? So these crazy looking fireflies, it's gonna clamp down on them, right? Let's give it a render. Let's see what our clamping did. Hey, there we go. Look at that. Looking much better. See, we got rid of all those fireflies. Before, after. Before, and after. So everybody that was asking those questions, how do you get rid of fireflies? There you go. Clamp and no caustics is generally your friend. Okay, so the scene is looking pretty good, but now we want to start thinking about composition, okay? Because we've got most of the objects in place. Let's think about composition. Well, we've got a very, very white-looking scene. The top half of this image here is pretty bland. Most of the action is happening down here on the floor, and we don't really want that. We want there to be some sort of contrast and something that is drawing our eye to both the artwork and this light thing. Suspended light, right? So the way that we're going to do that is by making this wall here dark. I think it's sometimes called a feature wall when you give a wall a different color. I don't know. My parents once told me that. It's kind of funny actually. Sorry, Mum and Dad, if you're listening to this, because I know you probably will. But when I was a young boy. Actually, let me just first of all let's just add this quick material. Let's just call this indoor wall. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, when I was a young boy, my parents were renovating our family room, and they went with a feature wall, right? So they colored the whole room like a creamy white color. Then they went with a feature wall, which is a wall with a different color, and the color they chose was purple, which is. It's not my immediate choice. I don't know. I sort of, when you're a kid, you sort of assume your parents know what they're doing. Sorry, Mum and Dad. It looks bad. It's horrible. I'm sorry. It's just very dominant. The color purple is like, you can't not notice it, it's in your face. It's there with you. It's going to stay. So that's what it's all about. Anyways, okay. So, what I did just then, while I was yattering on, I just added in separate material, black wall. I hit a sign on this wall here, which means that with the viewport color set as that, you can now see we've now got black and white, like the yin and the yang. It's all about contrast, isn't it? The other cool thing about thinking of composition-wise is that this little suspended lamp here is actually working in our favor subliminally, whether you realize it or not. But having this little bowed line and then coming down over here, it's actually drawing your attention down to over here, the chairs and the coffee table. So it's a very clever technique to use lines in order to draw the viewer's attention to something. And on that note, this coffee table, if we pull this out a little bit and then tilt it around, then you can use the line of that little stool there to actually draw your attention to this thing right here. Because ideally you want this to be the main center of focus. Anyways, now that we've done this, I think we can get into adding in the rest of the models. So let's jump to a new layer, and I'm going to add in some decorations, okay? So the first one is the books. So let's click groups. Sorry, just do that slower for you so you can follow along. Books, 4 open. Let's click on group. For some reason, it's got Barcelona chair and stool. That's a mistake. I apologize for that. It's in all of the models that were in the starter pack. I don't know how that happened. It's not even in the group, in the blend file. It's weird. Anyway, I think there's an empty or something. But all right, click on all books. Click link append. All right, so now it's on its own separate layer here. And we're also going to, actually, no, let's just move these books around first of all. So, because I like to use that little function, that little snap to function, I'm going to go to snap to face, and I'm going to pull this book here onto the coffee table. You can see that it's sort of snapping to the wrong face. There we go. Now it's sort of in the right place. And I'll rotate that around the Z-axis. So it's sort of, you can sort of see the edge of the book a little bit. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing with these guys. Actually, let's parent that to that book, first of all. And then I can then move this to anywhere I want. I think that was in the right spot. Okay, and then I'll rotate that around to about there. Just check that's not going through the coffee table here slightly. There we go. Okay. All right, that's all looking well and good. And finally, this open book here, I'm going to place this guy on our little stool to sort of make it look like, the the guy was reading a book by his little windowsill, and then he got up and he just put his open book that he was reading, and he just cast it aside onto his stool in a hastily manner, and that's where it is. So again, using the lines of the book, drawing your attention around the scene towards this one over here. So very cool, awesome. Books are in place. Next thing, by the way, I'm hitting Shift F1 is that little key function to append. The next thing we're going to add in is grass vase decoration. Click on group, decoration, grass in vase. Grass in vase. Grass in vase. Sounds German. Sorry to all the Germans listening. Alright, let's bring that up. And I'm going to go snap to the face. Let's just drag that over there, I reckon. Pretty good. Alright, so next to him, sort of off to there. Off in the distance. And then finally the last one we're going to add in is a very, very simple glass of water. Load that in. Yeah. And there we go. So this is for obvious reasons. He's reading a book, he's thirsty. So always thinking about the story. What's the story in this scene? Now, other thing, compositionally, there's a big empty spot on the left-hand corner here, right down there. There's too much floor, right? So there's a way around this. We add something in the foreground, and that will also give depth to the image, because a good image will always have a foreground, a middle ground, and a background. If an image looks like it's mostly midground or foreground, or just background, whatever, it just looks flat. So it helps if you can try and get those 3 levels in each of your scenes: foreground, middle ground, and background. So in the finished scene, the one that you saw at the start over here, you can see I'm watching The Social Network. Is this the one? Yeah, what is that? There we go. Okay. Oh man, what was I even talking about? Gosh. Oh yes, this right here. So this is what it looks like. It looks like the edge of like a handrail of a stairwell or something like that. But actually, what we're going to do is we're actually going to just take this coffee table right here. And because the coffee table is actually locked at the moment, so what I want to do is just select that and then just hold down and unselect all of those so that they're not locked anymore, so that they can now move freely. And then I'm going to hit Alt-D, and I'm just moving these out. And also I'm going to hit Alt-P to clear their parent and keep the transform so it's in the same spot. Move that out to there and move that up a little bit. So this is something in the foreground which is really going to help us when we add in the depth of field, sort of give it that edge, you know, something that looks gives the image more depth, I mean. So that's pretty good. And on the point of depth, whilst we're at it, let's select our camera here. And what do we want to be in focus? Have a guess. We want the chair to be in focus. So let's just drag this distance meter out to about there. There we go. Okay. Good. Fine and dandy. So, time for a render. Let's see the fruits of our labor. Alright, so it's looking pretty cool. It's alright. I just realized I didn't set any f-stop for our camera, so we can do that right now. That's why we haven't got any out of focus blur or whatever. So just click on f-stop for our camera. I'm just going to leave it at 5.6, which is sort of a, you know, rough sort of standard depth of field for this sort of scene. So that'll be fine. And next thing we're going to do is we actually want to put in a blind. So something up here, just the top part of the blind. And it's very, very easy to model a blind, and it'll just help you sort of cut out and also add visual interest up here, but cut out too much of this sky here. Because too much sky just looks a little bit strange. So I always like to add in a blind. So just put the cursor at that point right there. And what I'm going to do is add in a cylinder. Let's just go into full view mode over here. All right. And I want 16 vertices because we don't want it to be too high res. And I'm just going to, first of all, change the snap to increment. Sorry if this tutorial is getting a bit on, as it generally does. Trouble is, if you don't explain things, then people say, I wish you would explain things. But explaining things takes time. Alright, so I'm going to delete that face, and what I'm going to do is add in a mirror modifier, set it to, let's just clear the rotation, and set it to Y, okay, Y, and then clipping, there we go. And then now let's just pull that out, scale that back. So this is, the blind that I'm going for is sort of like that circular blind, that pull down blind, you know, sort of like when you pull down a projector screen, something that looks like that. So it's very simple, it's just a cylinder. And then if you go into sort of this view, we've got to pull that out so that it's away from the wall. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab these vertices right here. I'm going to hit Shift D, then Escape, and then Extrude. I'm going to extrude it down to about there. And then I'm going to grab this cylinder, and I'm going to duplicate the cylinder, and then I'm going to scale that down. And this is going to be just that end part of the blinds to about there. All right. And then we want that to be the same width as the rest of the blinds, so that's good. Okay, now very simple material for the blinds. The blind itself, a solid blind, solid, it's just a diffuse, but we want light to pass through this part of the blind, like the translucent part of the blind. So I'm going to give it another material. I'm going to call this blind translucent. And before I forget, select that face there, and then go blind transparent and hit assign. Okay, so now that we've done that, in order to get the light to pass through those blinds, what we need to do is use our diffuse shader here and combine it with a translucent shader. But we're not going to use a mix shader like we would normally. We're going to use an add shader, and that's going to allow light to pass through the object. So it's a diffuse from the front, but from the back, it's allowing light to pass through it. Now, if you set this to just white, it's going to be very, very bright coming through. Almost, it's like the same amount of light that you would get from the front. So generally, whenever you're using an add shader, the translucency needs to be toned way, 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 way down. And then I also try and give it a little color. Because generally, you know, when light passes through the blinds, it has like a little bit of a yellow look to it. So I find giving it a color like that will generally work pretty well. Also the blinds, maybe I'll make them a little bit gray as well, just so they're a little bit different. Whoops, I made that the viewport. Ugh, did that in the wrong order. All right, so just a little bit gray, and then I'm gonna hit smooth shader so that it is smooth, of course, and then so that you don't get that weird little artifact at the edge there, I'm gonna add in an edge split modifier. And there we go. Now let's have a look at our render with our blinds, and we should see something cool. And there we go. And I've noticed we're almost coming up to an hour, so I apologize. It's going to be another one of those long ones. But it's looking pretty good so far. I want the sun to just be hitting this stool here. Stool. Hitting the stool. That's funny. I just wanted to hit that little footstool a little bit more than it is currently. So I'm going to position the sun so that it is a little bit more working for my scene. So I'm just going to tilt that a little bit to the right, like that. So again, just lining it up with the edge of this window here, and you can guess sort of where the sun is going to go. And then I don't want so much to be on the wall, so I'm just going to tilt it down a little bit there as well. And I think that should actually be what we need. So I'll give that another render night right now, and let's see how that looks. Okay, so that's looking a lot better now. You can see the light sort of hitting that book there, and it's sort of all starting to come to place a little bit. Probably tilt the light a little bit more to the right so that we're getting more on the actual main chair, because currently it's sort of missing a little bit of it. So let's just pull that a little bit there. But then in doing so, we're going to miss some of the footstool. So actually, I'm just going to make this, if I can actually select it, I'm just going to widen the actual window frame itself. Alright, so just pull this window across. And the blinds, it doesn't really matter. It's actually out of shot anyway, so it, actually, I guess if you've got a weird looking reflection, it's going to look a little bit bizarre, so, alright. Alright, stretch that out. There we go. Okay. Alright, the final one, I think this one should just about nail it. All right, looking good. We got some decent light coming on pretty much everything we want now, and not on the stuff that is not important. So, next step, last step almost, is the trees. Look in the background. You can see that it's a very obviously fake looking background, right? It's got this grass field and yeah, it's very obvious. If you posted it online, somebody would say, yeah, I'm not really sold by the scene, you know, the environment. So luckily in the starter pack, we got one of the coolest models available. I'm giving to you. It is the tree, and it's called Tree Tall Green Flame. So let's just load this guy in. The trees, I must say, is one of my most favorite parts of the Architecture Academy. As some of you may know, I hired some artists to actually work with me to, you know, create some models and different things like that. And this guy, Rob Garlington, he made a whole bunch of trees using Blender, all made in Blender, 4 cycles. And they're all provided for free with the Architecture Academy. That's a little secret there for you, but it's on the way. Anyways, so I'm just going to use this same tree, and I'm going to use it 3 times, okay? Just rotating it at sort of, you know, different sort of directions like this. Okay. And I want it to sort of fill up in the background. Let's just pull that up. I want this tree here to be sort of clearly visible. And then this one here, I'm just going to pull down a little bit. And then this one in the background, I'll just pull that one down a little bit there as well. Let's just sort of tilt that to the right, maybe, something like that. Just sort of make it look like it's on a bit of a slight hill, so pulling it down a bit. Yeah, that should be pretty good. All right, so with the trees there, let's just, we'll do a comparison render. That's with the fireflies, looks awful. All right, and let's see how it looks now with the trees. All right, so there you go. Now this is the before and this is the after. You can see what an effect that's made. It's and those trees almost look photographic. I'm quite pleased with how they've turned out there, because they fit the lighting scheme perfectly for the scene, obviously. So it's a lot better than using just a transparent PNG of like a photograph of a tree or something. So they're really fitting in the scene. It's looking pretty good. I think that perhaps they're a little bit too close or too big for what I wanted. They're sort of dominating the focus a little bit because they're a bit too green. So I'm just going to push them to the background a little bit, and I'm also just going to lower them just slightly to about there. And I think now that should be pretty good. If I give that a render now, actually I'll bring this one main tree. So this main tree can sort of have a bit more of the limelight. I'll just bring this one a little bit forward. Yeah, something like that should be pretty good. And why would you be adding trees to a scene like this? Well, it's a good question. Actually, it's one of the, it's called a design, what's it called? Design principle, which is called the bifolia effect. And that is that human beings are most comfortable around nature. And it is, being surrounded by nature is good for tasks that require focus, problem solving and healing. So they say that for architecture, for hospitals, schools, and places of learning should basically have nice views of trees. So in our example here, where you've got a little reading corner for our little bachelor at home reading books, having trees nearby would be a very nice place to read. So that's why having trees there is sort of working for us. Anyways, that pretty much concludes the scene. We've now just about done it. The only thing left is to do some compositing, add in some finishing touches, because you want to sort of alter the mood a little bit, give it a little bit more of a bit of a punch. So we want to do a couple of things. One is we want to make the light from the window glow, okay? The other thing is we want to do a little bit of color grading to give it a nice sort of atmospheric mood, sort of a unified look. And the other thing is we want to give it a vignette, because that's my trademark and that's what everybody expects. No, but it draws your attention towards the center of the scene. So we're going to be doing those things. But first, before we re-render it or do anything else, in order to get the glow from this window here, what we want to do is we actually want to isolate the background, the outside. Now you can do that using a render layer. So if you click on render layers up here, you'll see that there is a pass which you can do for environment. Now, unfortunately, because we've got glass here, that won't actually work because you can't actually directly see the environment, meaning the world, because you've got glass in the way. So what we are going to do instead is with the window selected, select the glass material, and then down here underneath settings, you've got something called a pass index. And if you've ever wondered what that was, now you're about to find out. We're going to set that pass index to be 1, okay? It doesn't matter what number you give it, but you just have to remember what number it is. Next, go to your render layers, and then we're going to check the material index box, okay? So I'm just going to check that. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to crank up the samples. I'm going to go 400 samples for our final little render here. And now that we've done that, we'll come back in a second. All right, looking good. Now you've got the extra samples in there. It's starting to look very clear, very professional-ish, perhaps, maybe. So I'm jumping over to the compositor now, and this is where we're going to work our magic, all right? So first things first, let's clear up this stuff, because this is just junky. All right, move this across. All right, cool. First things first, we want to get that glow from the window. So you remember that we added in that, pass index for the glass, okay? So the way that we use that is by adding in an ID mask, this guy right here, and then we connect the index MA, which is the index material, to the ID mask input, like this. And then, if I just grab a mix node, like this, and then let's just Control-Shift on there, by the way, so you can see a viewer node of what's happening. If I just connect this to the factor input, and then take the output from our render layer and put that into the top input, what you'll see, oh look, it's already actually kind of working. Well, anyway, you're supposed to set this to 1, okay? Because the ID mask that we gave it is 1. So make sure that your ID mask here is set to 1. So that means it's now showing us just that material. So I think I actually have to place this on a separate one. Yeah, like that. So put that into the bottom input. And now I'll take that and make that color completely black. And now you can see we've completely isolated the window just by itself. So now, which is very cool, what we're going to do is add in a blur node. Set this blur node to fast Gaussian. Click relative and then go X, and then I'm going to make this 10%. Now to combine this with the rest of the render, we add in a mix node and then combine it by putting this into the bottom input, and then click add, and then now the value of this will define how bright that glow is. So you don't want to go overboard, guys. I know it's tempting, but try and make it as subtle as possible. I think a value of somewhere in between there. 0.25, I reckon, should look pretty good. So that's not bad. All right, next step, the vignette. We got to add the vignette. The vignette adds darkening to the corners of a scene, and it just about looks good on any photograph or image you're doing because it draws your attention to the center of the frame, which is generally what you want to do. So somebody actually told me, I've been doing the vignette in almost every tutorial I've ever done, but somebody sent me an email and said that there's actually an easier way to do it. So I'm going to add in the lens distortion node like this. I'm going to set the distortion value to 1. Now I'm not going to connect this to anything, right? Now I'm going to add in a blur node as I normally did. Connect this up, set it to fast Gaussian, relative, and let's go 20%. And then now you can see that you can't actually get any output from this yet. However, when you combine it with the mix node like this, and then set this to multiply, you can see that now you actually get that vignette. So you avoid having to do that math, that greater than math kind of junk, and connect this up, and yeah, it was just annoying. So just leave it disconnected and you don't have to do that. Kind of cool. So now I'm going to turn down this multiply node to, I don't know, don't want to go overboard, do we? Somebody sent me a comment or an email saying, Andrew, you should really take it easy on the vignette, because you go overboard far too much. So I'm taking some of it to heart. 0.6, is that all right, man? I don't know. Some people would be happy with 0.3. I like it. I'm going 0.6. All right, next step. We want to give some color grading to the image. A bit of a unity. Make it look like it's one image, like they're all sort of sharing the same sort of colors. And also change the mood. Make it look like it's a little bit sort of late afternoonish, reading in the corner kind of thing. So what I'm going to do is add in a color balance node, which are these 3 wheels. For those of you who don't know what the wheels do, the left wheel is for shadows, the middle wheel is for midtones, and the right wheel is for highlights. So this allows you to make slight color adjustments to different color values inside your scene. So it's very handy. And it's something that changing the actual light won't allow you to do. So for the colors of the shadows, I actually want the shadows to be slightly orangey red colored. So something like this. And then I also want them to be a little bit bright so that there's not an absolute dark value. So a little bit bright like that. And then the midtones, I want to make them slightly blue. This is a common color grading technique, is to make the dark tones a red color or a warm color, and then the highlights, want them to be a more of a cooler color. So this is a sort of a popular way of doing that. I think I maybe went a little bit overboard on the colors there, but you sort of get the picture. Maybe I'll turn up the highlights, turn up the midtones just a touch. And I think it's looking pretty good actually. It's not too bad. But that is pretty much it in its essence. You know what? I'm gonna crank up that vignette just a little bit more. Can't help myself. One other thing you might want to do, if you add in a filter node, just drop this in at the start and then set the filter to be sharpen. Then you can sharpen it. I set this to be 0.01 generally whenever I use it, and that'll just make everything pop a little bit. Just make it look a little bit more professional. Whoops. I got to connect it to the compositor, I guess. Composite. It already is connected to the composite. And why is that not working? Well, anyway, it doesn't really matter. You can see the finished result right here. So, so that's pretty much it. That's what I've done here in this tutorial. This is the finished result that I got from originally, which you can see is pretty much the same result. So, I've given you sort of a taster of what's inside the Architecture Academy. So, sort of telling you a whole bunch of different stuff. This one was pretty long because, you know, making a scene, architectural scene, generally does take a very long time. But I'm hoping that it was useful to you. Hope you learned a couple of things here and there, and you've got a few ideas sort of buzzing around your head. I'm interested in seeing any scenes you guys create using the free starter pack. Now, as promised at the start of this video, I told you that I was going to give you a little sneak preview of the lounge room tutorial that is going to be included in the Architecture Academy. So, without further ado, ta-da! So there you have it. This is the lounge room scene from the Architecture Academy. So this is a scene which has got a lot more going on. It's got a lot more stuff to it. And that's going to be week 1 of the Architecture Academy. So that's just a little taster to show you of sort of how sort of deep and complex some of the scenes go. And also thought I'd show you, whilst we're at it, because we were dealing with a whole bunch of models before, I'd show you that there is also a model pack which is included in the Architecture Academy, which has got a whole bunch of cool furniture, which has been professionally modeled using Blender and made for cycles. So it's actually made for cycles as opposed to like converted or anything like that. Because I've downloaded some models before myself, and I've always been sort of unimpressed with the quality that you get. So I'm very pleased to have sort of overseen this whole sort of operation, and the models are top notch, let me tell you. And finally, as well as that, there is a foliage pack which is going to be included in the course as well, available to all members, and that's got a whole bunch of awesome trees, shrubs, medium to large size trees to, of course, fill up any exterior scene, because it's definitely one of the deadly sins of architecture for an exterior scene to just have no greenery around it. So this is going to help you prevent that. And so that's pretty much it. So that concludes this basically sneak peek at the Architecture Academy, sort of giving you a taster of what's inside. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you can use some of the techniques and stuff to your advantage. And the doors for the Architecture Academy will open on the 10th of July 2013, so stay tuned for that. Anyway, that's it from me. Thanks very much for watching.